On October 28, 2020, a tragic discovery was made in Plain Township, Stark County, Ohio. The victim, 29-year-old Morgan Fox, was found dead in her car, with signs of a violent attack. Her boyfriend, the first to discover her, immediately called 911, stating that Morgan was not moving and that he feared she had been struck in the head. When the police arrived, the scene was chaotic, complicated by the rain, which threatened to wash away crucial evidence. Morgan's body was inside the vehicle, and it was apparent that something sinister had occurred. The initial assumption was that the incident might have been an accident, but things soon began to take a darker turn. As the officers investigated the scene, they discovered several key clues that suggested foul play. The most important discovery was the bullet hole in the passenger door of Morgan's car. Upon further examination, it became clear that Morgan had been shot, twice, once behind her left ear and once at the top of her head. It appeared that she was ambushed while getting into her vehicle. As the investigation unfolded, detectives began to piece together a timeline and gather physical evidence from the scene. Her purse, which still contained cash, was found next to her. The fact that the purse was not stolen and the presence of cash eliminated the possibility of a robbery gone wrong. Other pieces of evidence included tire marks in the grass next to a nearby house and mud stains on the fence, though it was unclear how these connected to the crime at that moment. One crucial piece of evidence that was found lying next to Morgan's car was her cell phone. Phones are often critical in investigations like this because they can provide a wealth of information about the victim's final moments. The phone was not damaged by the rain, which allowed the police to examine it for clues. The phone revealed that Morgan had spoken with her mother just the night before. Her mother told investigators that she had no knowledge of anyone who would want to harm Morgan, but she did mention that Morgan and her boyfriend had had some issues in the past, though their relationship appeared to be stable recently. The focus of the police investigation shifted to those who were closest to Morgan, which included her boyfriend and people in her professional life. Police questioned her boyfriend, who was understandably distraught. He claimed that Morgan and he had a good relationship and that there was nothing to suggest that anyone would want to harm her. However, detectives needed to probe deeper, and they quickly discovered that Morgan had some issues with her co-workers at FedEx, particularly concerning her phone. Morgan had experienced a conflict with several male colleagues after they stole her phone, which she had left on her desk. When she discovered them going through her phone's pictures, she confronted them. This conflict stood out as a potential motive for the crime, and detectives zeroed in on the men involved. The police began to question Morgan's boyfriend further, trying to understand if he had been involved in any way. He admitted that he and Morgan were not always on the best terms in the past, but denied any involvement in her death. He explained that Morgan had been having trouble with her male coworkers at FedEx, particularly regarding the stolen phone incident. He was forthcoming with information, which seemed to indicate that he had no part in the crime. As part of the investigation, the police reviewed surveillance footage from the area surrounding Morgan's home. The officers hoped that cameras might have captured something useful that could lead them to the perpetrator. Unfortunately, the footage from nearby surveillance cameras did not provide any substantial evidence. However, the police were lucky that Morgan's phone had survived the rainstorm, and they managed to retrieve the information they needed from it. The most important clue they found was a series of text messages between Morgan and her boyfriend, which painted a picture of a stable relationship. The last communication from Morgan was a text message sent to her boyfriend in which she mentioned her coworkers and the ongoing issue with them. The investigators then focused on the conflict Morgan had with her male coworkers, particularly the 3 men who had been involved in taking and looking through her phone. The police obtained personal files for each of these men and found that one stood out more than the others. Jason McDermott, a 29-year-old coworker, had previously received a formal warning at work for harassing another employee. This caught the attention of the police, as it suggested a history of problematic behavior. To further investigate, the police examined McDermott's work records and discovered that he had arrived at work at 2:58 a.m. on the night of the murder. The police knew that the crime must have occurred sometime between 2 a.m. and 2:30 a.m., which left McDermott in the vicinity of the crime scene during that window of time. However, there was still no direct evidence linking him to the murder, and McDermott continued to deny any involvement. As the investigation into McDermott deepened, the police began to gather more evidence that painted a clearer picture of his obsession with Morgan. It was revealed that McDermott had sent Morgan an apology letter after a confrontation in which Morgan had accused him of inappropriate behavior. Despite the apology, McDermott was warned by FedEx that he would be fired if he continued his behavior. McDermott's texts with Morgan revealed that he had been infatuated with her for a long time, and his feelings appeared to have grown stronger after the incident with her phone. It was clear from the messages that Morgan had become increasingly uncomfortable with McDermott's advances, and by the time of her death, she had stopped communicating with him altogether. McDermott's behavior became even more suspicious when it was revealed that he had been following Morgan for some time, even recording her without her knowledge. He had taken videos of Morgan while she was at work, including one where she was washing dishes at home. McDermott's obsession with her was undeniable, and it seemed that Morgan's refusal to engage with him pushed him to a dangerous breaking point. The investigation continued to find more evidence that connected McDermott to the crime. The police learned that McDermott had washed his car at a gas station on the day of the murder. Surveillance footage from the car wash revealed that McDermott spent an unusual amount of time cleaning his car, especially the tire wells. This detail became significant when the investigators later matched the tire tracks found at the crime scene to McDermott's vehicle. It seemed that McDermott had gone to great lengths to cover his tracks, but the evidence was beginning to add up. At the same time, investigators learned that McDermott had attended a vigil for Morgan, posting a picture of her with a heartfelt message on social media. The post, which expressed his sorrow at her death, struck many as suspicious given what was now known about his feelings for Morgan. As the investigation into Jason McDermott deepened, the evidence against him mounted. Detectives were able to secure a warrant to search McDermott's home and vehicle, hoping to find anything that might directly tie him to the murder of Morgan Fox. What they uncovered during the search further solidified their suspicions. At McDermott's home, police found several items that had been missing from the crime scene, including Morgan's phone. The phone had been wiped clean, but investigators managed to recover deleted files, including text messages that McDermott had sent to Morgan, some of which were deeply troubling. In the weeks leading up to her death, McDermott had sent Morgan dozens of unsolicited texts, many of which were aggressive and threatening. These messages, which had initially been dismissed by Morgan as unwanted advances, now appeared to show a growing obsession with her. In one particularly chilling message, McDermott threatened to harm Morgan if she didn't respond to him. Additionally, McDermott's vehicle was found to have traces of Morgan's blood in the trunk. This was a critical piece of evidence that could not be ignored. The blood was a clear indication that Morgan had been in McDermott's car, though he had initially denied any contact with her. The police also found an unused handgun in his vehicle, a piece of evidence that they would later trace back to McDermott's home. While the gun was not the one used in Morgan's murder, it was clear that McDermott was in possession of weapons, and his violent tendencies were becoming more evident. With the mounting evidence against McDermott, including the surveillance footage from the car wash, the tire tracks matching his vehicle, and the blood found in his trunk, police arrested him on charges of aggravated murder. The arrest was a turning point in the case, but the real work was just beginning. As the investigation progressed, the authorities worked to build a solid case that would hold up in court. They carefully examined every piece of evidence and made sure that they had a clear and indisputable timeline of events. The trial of Jason McDermott began in the fall of 2021. The prosecution was confident that they had enough evidence to convict him, but McDermott's defense team was determined to fight the charges. They argued that the evidence linking McDermott to the crime was circumstantial, and they attempted to paint him as a victim of circumstance, claiming that his obsession with Morgan had not been the cause of her death. The defense also suggested that Morgan's boyfriend might have been involved in the murder, though there was no evidence to support this theory. Throughout the trial, the prosecution presented a damning case, showing how McDermott's obsession with Morgan had escalated over time. They presented text messages, video evidence, and witness testimony that painted a disturbing picture of McDermott's behavior. They also detailed the extensive efforts McDermott had made to cover up his involvement, including the cleanup of his vehicle and the attempts to erase digital evidence from Morgan's phone. One of the most powerful pieces of testimony came from Morgan's mother, who spoke about her daughter's life and the impact McDermott's actions had on their family. Morgan had been a loving daughter and a promising young woman who had a bright future ahead of her. Her mother's emotional testimony left a deep impression on the jury and made it clear that Morgan's murder was a senseless act of violence that could have been prevented. On the final day of the trial, McDermott took the stand in his own defense. He claimed that he had been in love with Morgan and that he had never intended to harm her. He insisted that he was innocent of the charges and that the evidence against him had been manipulated. His testimony, however, was unconvincing, and many in the courtroom found his demeanor cold and unrepentant. The jury deliberated for several days before returning a verdict of guilty on all charges. McDermott was convicted of aggravated murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The verdict was a bittersweet victory for Morgan's family, who had waited more than a year for justice. While they were relieved that McDermott would never harm anyone again, they were left with the painful reality that their daughter's life had been taken so senselessly. The conviction of Jason McDermott brought some measure of closure to Morgan Fox's family, but it could not undo the damage that had been done. The Fox family, particularly Morgan's mother, struggled to cope with the loss of their daughter. Morgan had been more than just a victim. She had been a daughter, a sister, and a friend. Her death left a void in the lives of those who knew her, and it served as a painful reminder of how obsession and unchecked behavior can lead to devastating consequences. In the wake of the trial, Morgan's family became outspoken advocates for the prevention of domestic violence and stalking. They worked with local organizations to raise awareness about the dangers of obsessive relationships and the importance of recognizing the signs of unhealthy behavior before it escalates. Morgan's mother, in particular, took it upon herself to speak at schools and community centers about the dangers of stalking and the importance of speaking out when something feels wrong. The case also sparked a wider conversation about workplace harassment and the need for companies to take stronger measures to address complaints about inappropriate behavior. Morgan had experienced harassment at her job before her death, and it was clear that her concerns had been dismissed by her employer. In the aftermath of the trial, many began to question how workplace harassment is handled and whether enough is being done to protect employees from those who pose a threat. Morgan's friends and colleagues also shared their memories of her, painting a picture of a woman who was kind, compassionate, and full of life. They described her as someone who always had a smile on her face, even when she was dealing with personal struggles. Morgan's sudden death left a lasting impact on everyone who knew her, and it became a tragic reminder of how quickly a life can be taken away. As for Jason McDermott, he remains incarcerated to this day, serving a life sentence without the possibility of parole. While his conviction brought justice for Morgan, it did little to bring back the life she had lost. For those who loved her, the pain of her death will never fully heal, but they continue to honor her memory by speaking out about the dangers of obsessive behavior and the importance of supporting victims of violence. The murder of Morgan Fox had far-reaching implications that went beyond the immediate circle of her family and friends. The case served as a chilling reminder of the dangers of unchecked obsession and the potential for violence in relationships that may seem innocuous on the surface. It also highlighted the importance of taking threats seriously and addressing harassment in all forms, whether in the workplace, in personal relationships, or online. One of the most significant lessons from Morgan's death was the need for better education and awareness about stalking and domestic violence. Many people, including Morgan herself, had no idea how quickly an obsession could turn into something deadly. In hindsight, there were warning signs that were either ignored or not recognized as serious threats. For example, McDermott's behavior at work, his obsessive texting, and his attempts to record Morgan's private moments should have been red flags that were taken seriously. Unfortunately, these warning signs were not acted upon, and it cost Morgan her life. The case also brought attention to the role that technology plays in stalking and harassment. McDermott's ability to track Morgan through her phone and his use of social media to keep tabs on her demonstrated how easy it is for someone with obsessive tendencies to invade another person's privacy. While technology can be a tool for good, it can also be weaponized in the hands of someone with malicious intent. The case underscored the importance of maintaining personal boundaries in the digital age and protecting one's privacy online. In the years since Morgan's death, her story has been used to educate others about the dangers of stalking and obsessive behavior. Her family's advocacy work has helped raise awareness about these issues, and many people who may have otherwise been unaware of the signs of danger are now better equipped to recognize when something is not right. Through their efforts, Morgan's legacy lives on, and her tragic death has led to positive changes in the way we think about and respond to relationship violence. The case of Morgan Fox sparked widespread public interest and initiated a series of important conversations about the broader issues surrounding stalking, domestic violence, and workplace harassment. As details of the case were revealed through media coverage and the subsequent trial, many individuals and organizations began to reach out to Morgan's family, offering condolences and expressing their support. Community leaders, particularly those focused on women's rights and the protection of victims, took a stand in the aftermath of the trial. They called for stronger laws and better resources for those affected by stalking and domestic violence. Morgan's case became a focal point for campaigns aimed at improving the safety and well-being of women, particularly in the context of obsessive behaviors that can escalate into violence. Morgan's mother, who had become a staunch advocate for domestic violence awareness, worked tirelessly to ensure that Morgan's story wasn't forgotten. She took part in public speaking events and media interviews, urging lawmakers to consider stricter legislation to address stalking. Her efforts were particularly focused on pushing for the creation of more effective reporting mechanisms for individuals experiencing harassment, as well as improved support systems for victims who may feel unsafe or afraid to speak up. The Fox family also partnered with local shelters and advocacy groups to create programs designed to educate the public about the signs of stalking and the resources available to those in need. Through their work, they emphasized that stalking is not always about physical violence, but often involves a psychological component that can be just as damaging, if not more so. The emotional and mental toll of stalking can leave deep scars, and Morgan's story became a symbol of the invisible dangers that people, particularly women, face when dealing with obsessive individuals. Through various campaigns, the Fox family helped raise significant funds for shelters that provide refuge for victims of domestic violence, as well as legal assistance for those seeking restraining orders or protection from stalkers. Their advocacy work led to the creation of educational materials for schools, colleges, and workplaces, with a focus on the importance of early intervention and understanding the subtle signs of an abusive or obsessive relationship before it escalates. Morgan's story also prompted a broader conversation about mental health, particularly regarding individuals who engage in obsessive behavior. It became clear that, while McDermott's actions were malicious and deliberate, there were underlying issues in his life that went unaddressed, such as untreated mental health struggles and the lack of effective intervention before his behavior became dangerous. Many argued that early mental health support could have potentially prevented the tragedy from occurring, highlighting the need for more resources dedicated to mental health care, especially in the context of relationship violence. The case also brought attention to the intersection between harassment and the workplace. Morgan had made several complaints about McDermott's behavior at work, but these concerns were not acted upon promptly. The case raised questions about how employers handle allegations of harassment and whether there are sufficient safeguards in place to protect employees. In the wake of the trial, many companies began to reevaluate their workplace harassment policies, implementing stricter protocols for handling complaints and providing additional training for managers and HR staff to recognize and respond to warning signs of toxic or dangerous behavior. Several high-profile organizations, including national women's rights groups and public safety organizations, rallied behind the Fox family's cause. They advocated for stronger laws at both the state and national levels to address stalking and domestic violence. While progress was slow, their efforts paved the way for new legal reforms aimed at protecting individuals from obsessive and harmful behavior. These new laws focused on expanding the definition of stalking, increasing penalties for offenders, and improving victim protection programs. One notable success came when several states passed laws requiring employers to provide additional training on recognizing stalking behavior and protecting employees from harassment. Employers were also required to provide resources and support for workers who felt threatened by a colleague or supervisor, ensuring that victims had a safe and confidential way to report their concerns. These laws were a direct result of the public outcry following Morgan's murder and were seen as a necessary step toward preventing future tragedies. While these legal reforms were an important part of the aftermath, perhaps the most lasting impact of Morgan's case was the shift in societal attitudes towards stalking and domestic violence. Public awareness campaigns, fueled by Morgan's story, made it clear that these issues should not be dismissed or ignored. As a result, more people began to speak out about their experiences, and survivors of stalking and abuse found strength in sharing their stories. Morgan's tragic death had, in many ways, given a voice to those who had been silenced for far too long. Morgan Fox's tragic death left an indelible mark on everyone who knew her, and her memory continues to live on in the efforts to raise awareness about the dangers of stalking and domestic violence. As the years passed, Morgan's story remained a catalyst for change, with her family continuing their advocacy work and speaking out about the importance of recognizing unhealthy and obsessive behaviors before they lead to violence. Morgan's mother, who had once been devastated by the loss of her daughter, found strength in knowing that her advocacy work was helping to prevent other families from going through the same pain. While she could never fully heal from the loss of Morgan, she found solace in knowing that her daughter's death had led to positive change in the world. Morgan's story, while heartbreaking, was now a symbol of resilience and hope for those who had experienced similar struggles. In addition to her family's work, Morgan's case also inspired many survivors to come forward and share their experiences of stalking and abuse. These brave individuals, who had often suffered in silence, found support and validation through Morgan's story. They began to see that they were not alone, and that their experiences, no matter how painful, could lead to change. Morgan's legacy also continued to grow through the annual fundraising events and educational campaigns organized by her family and advocacy groups. These events, which were attended by survivors, supporters, and community leaders, raised millions of dollars for victims of domestic violence and stalking. The funds were used to support shelters, legal advocacy programs, and outreach initiatives aimed at helping those in need. One of the most poignant moments in Morgan's legacy came when her mother established a scholarship fund in her daughter's name. The scholarship, which was awarded to students pursuing careers in social work and criminal justice, was designed to honor Morgan's memory and continue her fight for justice. The scholarship fund has helped countless students achieve their goals of working to end violence and harassment, ensuring that Morgan's impact will be felt for generations to come. As time went on, Morgan's story was shared across social media platforms, with people from around the world using her name and memory to raise awareness about stalking, domestic violence, and the importance of supporting survivors. Her family received messages of support from strangers who had been touched by Morgan's story, and they found comfort in knowing that their daughter's life had made a difference, even if that difference came at an immeasurable cost. In the end, Morgan Fox may have lost her life at the hands of someone who was consumed by obsession, but her death was not in vain. Her story continues to inspire others to take action, to speak out, and to fight for justice. Her legacy, one of love, resilience, and advocacy, will forever be a reminder that even in the face of unspeakable tragedy, there is the potential for change, hope, and healing. As the years pass, the memory of Morgan Fox remains a guiding light for all those who are working toward a future where no one has to suffer at the hands of an obsessive or violent individual. The lessons learned from her case continue to influence the way we view relationship dynamics, mental health, and the importance of supporting victims of abuse and harassment. The continued advocacy for stronger laws and better support systems reflects the determination to prevent another tragedy like Morgan's. Her case, while it ended in a conviction and justice for her family, also exposed the deep flaws in our societal approach to stalking and harassment. These issues are often dismissed, not taken seriously, or misunderstood until it is too late. However, with the efforts of those like Morgan's family and the broader community, there is hope for real, lasting change. As for those who loved Morgan, They continue to keep her memory alive by educating others, supporting victims, and working toward a world where no one else has to endure what she did. Through their dedication, Morgan's spirit lives on, and her story remains a powerful reminder of the importance of love, respect, and the need to take action when faced with troubling behavior.